Brooklyn now. I got an emergency call for a server that has a problem. I think I'll just work my way south and then take the Manhattan Bridge or something like that. Probably be my best bet. Some of those dreary, rainy Saturdays, not the most fun day to be messing around. Yeah, well, if you got the right gear on, I got these I think they're fly pants on. They have like a liner, but I'm not using the liner, but it's a waterproof shell. I don't like pants with waterproof shell, a waterproof liner, because inevitably you're going to be too hot. I mean, these are already hot enough. And then I'm just wearing a Givey raincoat, which is pretty good. Person's going. There's no left turn there, but the person looked like they were trying to make a left turn. Yeah, generally when I'm riding in the rain, I just make sure that I'm using tires that I'm used to. Like this bike, I'm used to these Kenda K761s. I think I'm actually rethinking my whole idea on tires. I think what it is with tires, of course you want tires. I mean, there are tires that are known to be a problem, like in adverse weather. There are definitely certain tires that the compound just doesn't function well in the rain. Those kind of tires you want to avoid. But definitely you want tires that you're comfortable with and you know the predictability of them. Because tires that react the way that you're used to, that's going to be really important. Because the way you drive and your conditions and everything like that, if you're familiar with the tires and you know how they react, that's going to be a very critical thing. Today the traffic is extra heavy today. But definitely, you got to use a tire that you feel like you know what the reactions will be. if you're using a tire that you're not familiar, and you don't know how it reacts, that's going to be a big problem for you. But the reviews are pretty accurate for the most part. If you read about different tires and how they are in certain kinds of weather. That's how I found out about the Kenda K761. It's a good tire. Reacts fairly well. Thank you. Thanks. But I went by the reviews and then I tried the tire out, so I know where its breaking point is, where it's going to slide. I know how it reacts. I know pretty much what makes a tire break, and I know where I can push it, how hard I can push it. And those are all things you just learn from messing with different brands of tires. Like the Shinko 244 that I have on the back tire here, I just threw that on because my Kenda K761 was flat spotted, and that's not the greatest tire. And actually the Shinko 244 is actually really bad in winter. The compound rubber just slides when you get on manhole covers or anything wet, and it's cold. The rubber it just gives way. It's not a good tire for winter, and I just learned that, but I guess if I had read the reviews didn't really tell you much. Yeah, the reviews don't give you like detailed information like that. How is it when it's cold and wet? Those are details that you need to just find out for your own. So I'm working my way on 56th Street. I'll take that over. And then also when I use the Shinko 244 on the KOR, that's too heavy of a bike for that tire. It would, within like the first 100 miles, it would just chunk. The rugs would just chunk right off. And it was actually really dangerous because it was just bare tire, like just the carcass. Actually, it chunked off so bad that all you saw was the tube inside, which is totally insane because if you drove over anything sharp, it would just puncture the tube. So I'm not really too happy about that tire, and I'm seeing it already starting to crack on this XR. So if it chunks on me on this XR, I'll make sure that I post it. I'm gonna post pictures because that's not good. But it's a very cheap tire, I think it's a good tire to put. It never chunked on me when I had a DRZ 400. I guess because the DRZ 400 is a little bit lighter than an XR 650, and doesn't, maybe I'd say it doesn't have as much torque, but I doubt it though. Because the DRZ's got some pretty massive torque. I'm gonna think about it. Yeah, it definitely does. So I don't know if it's the additional weight or what that made the tire crack already on this bike, because I just put them on. I mean, within a month. So that is pretty bad. You know what? I forgot to wipe off the camera. I don't know if you guys can see. It's going to be a cold ride out to Brooklyn, I can tell you that. Definitely. I'll just take it slow. So yeah, the tires, you got to try them out, see what you like. I mean, like I tried a Metzeler Karoo 3 recently, just experimenting. And I like it. It's a nice knobby. It's a nice knobby dual sport that works well on the KLR. It can handle the weight. It eventually cracks, because any kind of chunky tire is going to crack on a KLR. It's a heavy bike. I mean, I don't think you can consider it a KLR, a dirt bike. It's more of an adventure bike, an economical adventure bike, but a totally awesome one because you can use the KLR in a city like New York and park in the street. You don't have to spend $600 or $300 a month in my neighborhood. Man, if you live in Brooklyn, you probably could get it for $150. which would be good. I mean, that's fine. $150 a month. And you're not going to get that in west side, in the 60s and 70s. You're not going to get $150 a month for parking for a motorcycle, which would be fair, but you're only going to get that in Brooklyn, Harlem, and Queens. And then if you did get $150 a month here in Manhattan, you'd probably have a situation where you might not be able to take it out all the time. Might not be accessible to you. So you need to have a bike like in New York. Well, there's two different camps in the side of the story. Some people say I would never park in the street, and some people say they would. Some people say they wouldn't, and some people say they would. Well, I don't know. It's up to you. But it really depends on the cost and if it makes sense or not. $150. If I could find in my neighborhood and it was easy garage that was close to my place, and I could get in and out quickly when I leave, I would do it. But in my current situation, I have the bike locked, to the ground, so it's safe. Nobody can drag it away. That's what you want, though. If you're going to be parking in the street and you can't lock the bike to a stationary object, then I tend to agree. Some buildings don't like that. Like the building across the street from me will cut your lock if you go ahead and put if you put anything locked to a post or anything like that, it'll cut the lock. Seems unfair, but they have policies of the building, and they don't allow that. Any locking to any planters or anything like that, they don't allow it. They'll just cut it. The building maintenance will just cut it, and then they're not going to take your bike or anything, but they'll cut the lock. Which totally sucks, I mean, even on bicycles, because my neighbor locked his bike up, and they cut the lock. No, he's pretty upset about that. He was like, "Why would you cut the lock on a bicycle?" But the maintenance guy said, "Listen, no hard feelings. It's just the policy here. We don't allow anything locked, to anything in front of our building." It's funny because that's city property, but actually it's not. Like the planners and stuff like that, that actually falls into their guidelines. So if they don't want you locked into it, it's their policy. But all these things come into play, and you learn what's good, what's bad. But it all remains to be seen what's going to happen, with supply issues and pricing and and all that, like on motorcycles, if it's going to go up to a point that, it doesn't make sense to be parking in the street, that's possible. Because if motorcycles reach the price of $12,000 and more, then, which I don't think is going to happen to like an XR or a KLR, but because Kawasaki's worked really hard to maintain the pricing structure. But that wouldn't work for parking in the street, because you're getting involved in something that costs too much to, and also people stealing them it makes it worthwhile to them to cut chains and have a van with them that they might get pulled over. A lot of guys don't like driving around a van at night because their chances of getting pulled over is higher. Obviously, that there's a big chance they'll get pulled over. Oh shit, man. Yes, the guys doing the van thing, they may or may not feel confident to do that with a KLR, because, obviously the risk is not worth the reward. And then if you and you're going to need like 3 people, 4 people, so 4 people on a block is at night at 3 o'clock in the morning, and in a white van or whatever kind of van they're using, an old Ford van, because that's who I caught last time trying to get my XR. They had unbolted the rear wheel, taking the axle bolt out. They put it in the van. I kept getting alarms on my phone, and I said, let me check this out. And then sure enough, there were 2 guys there, and I saw them on camera, so I ran down the stairs, and at that point they just got the axle bolt out, ran to the van, put the axle bolt in the van, and then they were coming back to get the bike, and they were lifting the bike. And just as I was running down, because the blink camera, that's another thing, in front of my place I have a regular security camera and a blink camera, both of which notified me. So I get warnings from everything, and then the blink camera was notifying the shit out of me, so I knew something was wrong. And then as soon as I was running down the stairs, the GPS started calling me. So, because my wife said, your phone was ringing while you were running down the stairs, and I checked the missed calls, and it was the GPS. So that was at that point when I went back to look at the camera footage, they were actually lifting the rear of the XR, trying to get the chain off the sprocket. But, they weren't successful. And I don't know if they knew about XRs, because the way they were trying to get the chain off didn't make sense. Like, the guy was getting in the back of the bike and lifting it way up, but he wasn't doing anything to try to push the wheel forward. So I guess they just, they steal so many bikes, they don't learn about them. But if you can lift the back of the bike up on an XR, but if you don't push the wheel forward, the chain won't have enough slack to come off the sprocket. And you need to get that off to be able to get the wheel away from the bike. And then what they were going to do was just take the bike away. But anyway, I've mentioned this before, and I got videos on it if you want to check it out. But that was two guys, because two guys could manhandle an XR. But two guys could not manhandle a KLR. I don't care how strong you are. It's not about that. It's about the cumbersome awkwardness of the object. Like the KLR is a big object to be manhandling like that. I mean, no matter how strong you are, you may have the biceps to lift 500 pounds, but the fingers that you use to do that don't have the capacity to carry that weight. So your limbs, your fingers, don't have the tensile strength to operate that kind of weight. That's where the problem comes in. You have like massive cuts on your hands, like from grabbing away at sharp pieces on the KLR trying to manhandle it, and that's not going to be something that you could do. It's just sheer physics. You're not going to be able to manhandle a 450-pound object that's of the size of a KLR. It's huge, and grabbing with your fingers, a couple of fingers and a thumb. You've got to have something that can grapple that. They don't have something like that. They're not driving around with a flatbed truck and grappling it into the back of the truck. They probably would love to have something like that, but the problem is that driving in New York City with a pickup truck and a motorcycle in the back, like a Honda XR, that would be bad fucking news, man. You'd have like all kinds of eyes from cops on you. All kinds of different cops looking at you. And I don't think you'd want to be involved in something like that. It would be way too risky, So you're going to have to bring, if you want to get it done quickly. And by the way, I've never been a career motorcycle thief. I've never tried it, never done it. I'm just speaking from what logical deductions, from what I've learned from them trying to steal my bike, And if you had if you brought 4 guys with you in a van, NYPD is pretty hip to that shit, The one thing they can't win against is the scooter boys, Because one of the cops explained to me, when the scooter boys tried to take this XR, and they had a battery-operated grinder with them, and they were just grinding away at the chain, and then they didn't notice that I had a disc lock, and they just got fouled up with all that shit. And so I got the alarm on my GPS. But the cop told me, if we catch them in the act, they just run like maniacs, and then if we're chasing them and they go on the sidewalk, they're not going to stop. No matter what, they're not stopping. Because they're on a scooter, they fill up their tank full, and a scooter is not known to be a very fast machine, but they do use it. They use a scooter that's a 2-cycle premix, so it's got some balls to it. And, they'll just zip along the sidewalks. They're not stopping. They're not stopping no matter what. And they'll do anything to get away. So, and that's what the cop told me. He said, we can't go after these guys. They're too much, And, what am I going to say to that? Because he's actually right. They are too much. They're willing to take too much risks, like that the regular police officer can't do. Like a regular police officer, he would be risking his career, and he might even end up in jail. Like if he takes out like a couple people on the sidewalk, that would be definitely not cool. It just wouldn't be okay, So I get that whole scenario. And so it gets back to my major point, though. I mean, what's going to happen with motorcycling in New York, with the pricing on motorcycles? It's going to be an interesting scenario. Like New York would be a perfect place to ride electric Surons and things like that would be awesome. Like, because you want something that can handle both off-road and on-road. But nobody's riding Surons in New York because it's too much of a theft city. If you park a Suron in the street, someone's going to steal that. They'll attack it like animals, like a Suron. Oh my God, that's a $7,000, dirt bike. They're gonna go nuts on that fucking thing, and it has no registration. It's got no. I mean, what are you gonna do with that serial number of that Suron? You gonna give it to the cops? They're gonna put it in a database? I don't think so. I honestly can tell you that's not gonna end up in any kind of database for anyone to find that. They're just not gonna. They're not going to find that Suron if it gets stolen. And actually, the interesting thing is, whoever steals that, they would be more than confident to ride that around New York City with the serial number even visible. They wouldn't care because there'd be no cop in New York that would ever run that serial number. They wouldn't check any database. I know there's databases for stolen bicycles, and there's a lot of that going on in other cities, but that's not being done here. So, basically, you're on your own. And I think the Suron would be too much to protect. It would be too ridiculous. You need a place where you have a ground floor apartment. You just push your bike in the door. And the problem is nobody wants the ground floor because it's easily broken into. If you have anything in your apartment, someone could do like a follow robbery. It's not safe for women to be all these brownstones don't have ground floor because it goes like a stairs down to the basement. But if for women to live in a ground floor apartment with windows, they better have really good bars because you're gonna have people like looking at you, scoping you out, waiting for you to come out. There's gonna be too much going on. It's not safe. And there's been plenty of horror stories of women that have moved to New York that weren't familiar with that, and they moved into an apartment in the outskirts of the city, and it didn't have bars in the windows, and it was a ground floor apartment. They got a good deal. They liked it. It was cute, whatever. And then somebody broke the glass in the middle of the night, came in, raped them or killed them. It's too risky. It's an insane situation that, almost every New Yorker is very hip to it. They're very hip to the fact that, and I notice now, like even women when they move to the city are very hip to the whole deal where you can't be staying in a ground floor apartment with no bars in your windows. It's like not even allowed now, I think, because there's been too many horror stories of college girls and young girls moving to the city unaware of the dangers, because they weren't in Manhattan. They were like in the outskirts of the city, and they figured, it's kind of like the suburbs, I should be safe with a window with no bars, and that's not the case at all. You can't have a front-facing apartment, like that. I lived in Ozone Park, Queens for a while, and it used to creep me out how many people would come into the backyard that were definitely creeping around. Like, you'd be like, yo, what are you doing, man? Like, it's a private backyard with a driveway that ends up nowhere, and why would someone be walking back there? And there were constantly dudes like creeping back there, looking around for shit, trying to break into things. Like my landlord had like a little utility shack. They broke into that. The neighbor had a a motorcycle in the inside of the garage. They stole that because they come around. They're looking for open doors or stuff that can easily be opened, and then they're going to come in and take what they want. But all these things come into play, so it's going to be really. The point of my story, it's just a really long, drawn-out story, but the point of my story is